Hi, and welcome to Amy and Sarah. I'm Sarah Argus, and this is Amy E. Bartell, and we're just going to chat about our latest piece called Act Two. So, Amy, you started this piece. What inspired you?
Well, I have a lifelong fascination with the phrase under the big top and the idea that the circus and the idea of living in a circus and the idea of performance and the three rings of performance define so much of us, whether it's positively or negatively, whether it's with humor or with pathos or with a deep sense of drama. The particular image I started this piece with comes from a photograph I took at a museum, and the image has stuck with me as full of joy and humor and athleticism in some ways, and also a sense of style. The character itself looks very full of panache and interesting sort of knickers,
He's
and
got
yet
an
there's a
attitude.
darkness to it, and there's an angularness, and there's a there's an out of placeness, there's an awkwardness to it that I'm always drawn to. I'm drawn to awkwardness. I'm drawn to things that don't quite fit, that look like maybe they want to. So uh, not only do I feel like that's a good image for me for this time, but also it's a lifelong quest for me to wrestle with imagery and concepts of things that are trying to come together that might not otherwise be brought together.
Love that. And I think that brings up a great point of things just being, you know, too perfect sometimes, and how we all just have to be okay with things not being perfect because we won't be able to control everything. And um, that fantastic fabulous clown led us to later in one of our moves. I had discovered this quote that I just felt was so fitting to, I think it reflected everything you just said. And it's actually a quote from Elizabeth Martin's book Everything You Came to See, which is about the circus. And the quote says, it can't just be beautiful, it has to be weird, it has to be frightening. So what was your response when you saw that?
I felt like you found the perfect statement for the piece because, um, I think there's a way that when we are put on edge with the beautiful, which is also the frightening, we are somehow in a level of being alert, which to me opens us up to experiences and it opens up our thinking. There's a heightenedness to it, but there's also something that you can't take for granted. It's not just beautiful, and it's also not just weird. It's also not just frightening. It is all of those things. And so it speaks to me to that idea of things being layered. Life right now feels layered that way. There is horror, there is dread, there is fear, there's anxiety. There's also beauty, there's also joy. There are also birthdays being had every day. Um, and it's all true and it's all simultaneous. And I think for me, that quote, when you found those words, it was like, yes, it just pulled it together. And the nature of the writing itself, those letters themselves, really just personalize it. It feels so ultimately one-on-one. I feel like I'm with the person who's written that.
Yeah, that was my handwriting, so I'm
Yeah.
glad that came
Yeah.
across. Worked on that very hard with all my neat letters. um, I think my kindergartner teacher would be very proud. Yeah, and I think I know I talk about this a lot in my day to day, but like the city influences me so much in the way I now see the world and what I perceive as beautiful. And I think walking down the street in Manhattan or Brooklyn or wherever I am, you see so many things that would be quote unquote considered weird, where I mean, at least in the time that I grew up in Syracuse, where I tried to be like that preppy type A student, and to some degree I still am, but there's this this uniqueness that you can find who you are and have the freedom to express that. If you love purple, I see people wearing all purple all day long. Or if, people are wearing all black, or people have crazy hair or quote unquote crazy hair. And I think, that what would considered be weird is the beauty of the time that we're living, because people get to be personal. They get to show who they really are. And I think it's a glorious thing.
I agree. I am always drawn to this idea of looking around the corner of something. So I'm a photographer who wanders the world in alleyways or behind the buildings, not just in front and not just in the park, but behind the park and behind the bench.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when you go to places that aren't zoned for you, so to speak, is when things become more illuminated. You see the backside of something, you see the underbelly of something, which can really explain the piece, but from the other side. When I look at my hand, I have one half of my hand is entirely freckled and dotted. It's completely weathered and it's 56 years old and it's full of wrinkles, and I turn my hand over and I have this entirely other part of me, and I think about that when I photograph. I think, okay, I'm out in the world wandering this side, and then I turn the corner and there's this, but it's the same hand, which sounds like a really probably lame analogy or way of thinking about it, but it is how I think about it. I think about what are we not saying, or what are we not showing? And in the circus, it is the idea that it is a world where the lighting is controlled, the space is controlled, and yet everything about what happens in that sense of control is extremely uncontrolled at the same time. So your quote, going back to your quote, it really pulls it together. Despite all the hype, despite the marketing, despite all the tickets and the way you have a seat to see the circus, the experience of being in a circus is actually the experience of having everything possible all at the same moment, which is really the background and the foreground all coming together.
Yeah, it's organized chaos.
Organized chaos. Yes, 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 indeed. That's about it. That's Act 2.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much again for this collaboration. I can't say it enough. It's the highlight of my days. And on that note, excited for our next piece.
Way fun. You get to start it. Yeah.
I know. Bye.
Peace out.